Oh, I'm doing great, Josh. Thanks for asking. So this week it's episode 127. What in the actual gosh darn heck are we covering this week?
네, 최근에 나온 박진영 제가 굉장히 팬인데요.
Leviathan. Man, I knew you were a pretty hardcore metal elitist, but I didn't expect you to go that obscure. Whatever, Leviathan. Whoa. Jesus. Easy there, college boy. So what you are listening to now is the first band featuring Chris Barnes, later of Cannibal Corpse fame, later of 6 Feet Under Infamy, because that band sucks. This band is from 1987. They're from New York. They're often labeled as death thrash, but I don't really hear it. When I think of death thrash, I'm thinking of something like the Good Incubus, the one from Louisiana. Not to be confused with the other Good Incubus, the one from North Carolina. Or the Bad Incubus, that shitty fucking California nu metal band that sucks ass. They suck, I hate them. So yeah, this is thrashy. It sounds a lot like Blood Feast, Arachnid. Not terribly original. And for that reason, it's probably never been reissued.
근데 솔직히 어느 정도 맞는 것 같긴 해요.
Oh, wrong Leviathan. You were looking for something a little bit farther west into the country. Something that's put out, a few full-length albums. All right, I got you. Once again, I must compliment you on your exceptional taste in very obscure metal. So here we have Leviathan from Littleton, Colorado. A small town where nothing bad ever happened, especially not in the 90s. And they play some kind of progressive power metal stuff with lots of stop-starty bits like that. Vocals might be a bit much for some more extreme metal fans to get over, but I don't mind them. And the guitar riffs more than make up for it. Lots of cool chord shapes being used. Their later stuff that I've heard, I haven't been as fond of. They went a little too far into the prog realm. Stuff like Dream Theater and whatnot that I don't really care for. Too many keyboards, but this is cool. There are these cool little fucking use of harmonics, bar chords and whatnot. Highly recommend the first Leviathan album, Deepest Secrets Beneath, produced by Jim Morris of Morrisound of all people. So it's surprising that it's so obscure. I feel like this is an album a lot of people should be more aware of. Oh, I know. I know which Leviathan you meant. I was just messing with you. That's right, Leviathan, the solo project of Jeff Whitehead, a man better known to the black metal community as Rest, who has quite the interesting backstory. He started out as a pro skateboarder way back in the late 80s and early 90s. There's actually a picture of him on the little sticker on the cartridge for Skate or Die 2. That's him. And he designed a tattoo that was later unceremoniously ripped off by Incubus, the shitty Incubus, the really shitty Incubus, not either of the two good ones, as an album cover for whatever shitty album that was, the one with the heart hand grenade thingamabobber. Yeah, he drew the thing that's based on. Very accomplished artist in the tattoo realm and just general paintings and whatnot. He's got a lot of talent in that realm. But for years, he was kind of a secret black metal fan, very much infatuated with the aesthetics of the genre, much in the same way as Werewolf was from Satanic Warmaster. And you can see that even right down to the song titles. They're almost in sort of this broken, garbled form of old English. So they sound very stately and evil, but also they were written by somebody doing ESL shit, like Heir to the Noose of Ghoul, or Merging with Sword unto Them. Just kind of weird. It looks like some Norwegian teenager could have written it, but it's not. It's this guy from California who is an avid student of the black metal arts. If you read interviews with him, he often mentions being into pretty niche level stuff, like the first 2 Campfire albums. He has a very in-depth knowledge of a lot of the little tricks and wacky occurrences going on early Gorgoroth albums and whatnot. And you can hear that in the music. He also is a drummer by trade, even though a lot of the Leviathan stuff uses a drum machine. I think he's just like hitting V drums or something, because it sounds like the sounds are synthetic, but the way they're being played seems like it's an actual human being behind the kit. And the fact that he's a drummer gives the music quite a bit more rhythmic complexity. He's also famous for being part of maybe the second wave of American black metal artists, if you consider the early stuff like Grand Belial's Key, Absu, and Profanatica spread out all over the country as being like the foundational texts of it. You could maybe include Judas Iscariot there as well, sort of like bridging these two waves, because Rest has done a lot of stuff within Judas Iscariot's orbit, but he's part of the second wave, a lot of which comes out of California, which produces a surprising amount of decent black metal. You have Leviathan, which I enjoy. Zaster, I'm not always in the mood for it, but when it's good, it's pretty good. And then nowadays you have all the Black Twilight bands coming out of there, and most of that is pretty fucking great. I like Volon and Ars Menda quite a bit. Good live, too, if you get a chance, as long as the sound guy doesn't fuck it up. He's also famous for a bit of controversy involving a certain ex-girlfriend who he was accused by of assaulting her with his tattoo equipment, because apparently...
And I took the butcher knife and put it up to her neck. I said, if you want to live to see tomorrow, you better start frying them eggs a little bit better than what you're frying. I'm tired of eating sloppy, slimy eggs.
Apparently she made all that shit up, though, because he was let off on that with eventually some settlement for like a couple years probation. And according to other people that knew them at the time, she's a bit of a mental case prone to fabricating such accusations. But the real controversy in the black metal realm is Leviathan actually any good? You know, there's a lot of people out there, Brett Stevens and whatnot, that'll, Leviathan doesn't really fit their program. It doesn't fit the standard narrative of black metal's great in Scandinavia. You know, it spreads around the world. Burzum is the absolute peak of it. Nothing can ever be better. And then it dies off in the 90s, and then everybody else is just pretending. This doesn't fit into that at all, because he's not even really from like a black metal background. He's an ex-skateboarder that held some appreciation for the genre and decided to put his own spin on it. Also, as you've probably inferred from some of the other bands I've been mentioning, he's kind of part of that icky Zaster, although I do enjoy some Zaster, Krieg, Knockmistium, West Coast black metal axis that is responsible for a lot of nonsense. And Leviathan was even one of those early US black metal bands that started getting good press from like Pitchfork and whatnot, at least until the tattoo thing may or may not have happened. So there's a couple red flags there. I'm like, dude, I really don't enjoy too much Knockmistium outside of Instinct, Decay, and Krieg. As I covered last week, not my favorite stuff, and a lot of the people that are into that sort of thing are fairly disgusting. You know, Stephen O'Malley seems like a cool dude, but have you ever hung out with like a Sun fan? Yikes. Is this shit actually any good? I don't know. I feel like I get defensive about Leviathan because for years... Okay, so initially, you know, Leviathan gets big when I'm in like high school, and I fucking love this shit because I'm like, it's like black metal, and it's really good, and it's American. I myself, you know, find myself domiciled in the United States, so I'm like, fuck yeah. And then I start getting into the more esoteric underground stuff, start reading a little bit more. Eventually I'm pushed to sort of renouncing stuff like Leviathan as being like poser shit, which is actually a very posery thing to do. And then in the years to come, I happen to like pick up Tentacles of Horror, and I'm like, holy shit, this is actually fucking great. So I'm very defensive about my enjoyment of Leviathan. I think he put a lot of his heart and soul into this project and did some interesting stuff with it, right down to like the album art. He does all that himself, and he doesn't write about, you know, like standard Satan burning churches stuff, although philosophically and sonically, I guess you could describe this as very satanic adversarial music. It gets like pretty personal, to the point where some people might describe it as depressive black metal. And like he even did a song that he never published the lyrics for about another girlfriend of his that had died. So there's like bits of grief in it, but it's not really like, it has suicidal elements to it, but it's not really part of like the larger suicidal black metal thing, which normally I can't stand. This one's a bit too angry and esoteric to fit into that. He put out a lot of demos. He put out lots of splits, and the interesting thing about the splits, besides the fact that he always outshines whatever band he's doing a split with, in my estimation, even when he did a split with Zaster. He picks interesting bands to do splits with, like, yeah, Saftharan and Krebane. Krebane's actually not terrible. Saftharan's kind of boring, but, you know, like, that's US black metal, whatever, you know, US bands doing splits with US bands. But then he does splits with bands like Black Death from Russia and Juvenes from Poland. The Juvenes side of that split actually isn't great, and it's not a very good representation of their overall sound, but it's interesting that you would do splits with bands that are that close to, like, Graveland and Satanic Warmaster and whatnot. It's a treading on the line of stuff that a lot of the Wolves in the Throne Room crowd would not be so fond of. So I think that might give you a decent idea of the level of evil and malevolence you can expect from this music. Probably the aesthetic that Leviathan is most notable for is these long, winding tremolo riff passages, which are melodic in a way, but he adds in lots of weird diminished chords to the proceedings. He's kind of always bending it to where it's just slightly weird, and then occasionally he'll just shove it into straight up dissonance. This shit right here, this is pretty good stuff. I do like his long-winded, melodic, often rather doomy material, but for me, where Leviathan gets really good is when he starts doing stuff in the slightly more percussive realm, an element of the music that you can hear going back to his early demos even. So here are these dissonant, deranged sounding riffs. I also enjoy his vocals quite a bit. I know they're a turnoff for some people, but I think they're interesting. Soaked in reverb. But yes, this is a very good dissonant riff. I also like the weird little dissonant tremo that was encasing it until he pulled that layer away. Lots of layers to the sound. Also very good bass tone. Instrumental separation. The songs tend to start off very complex and dissonant and then move towards more elemental elements. This is an interesting counterpoint to the cacophony you heard earlier. This more primal tremolo riff based around chromatic scales. But didn't I mention something about the music getting really percussive and possibly even groovy? Hell yeah, that's fucking awesome. Just this Celtic Frost style chug riff where the phrases are interspersed with these diminished chords and nasty harmonics, guitar noise and whatnot, like that right there. I know I hear some people out there saying that this is like poser stuff, but actually you're fucking wrong. Some people would say, oh, that just sounded like Converge or something. They couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually very, very black metal, going all the way back to stuff in the 80s, like King Diamond and Merciful Fate. So here we have a fairly primal, fairly elemental element. Did I say elemental elements earlier? That was stupid. But yeah, very, you know, melodic kind of stuff leading into a breakdown of sorts, utilizing harmonics and guitar noise. Gee, where have I heard that before? I heard that in Leviathan, so, you know, like, fuck you. I told you, this guy has studied the fuck out of black metal going back through the 80s shit like Merciful Fate and whatnot, and he uses the same compositional techniques.
이번에 처음으로
Am I utilizing a Grand Belial's Key track that operates under the same principles in order to lend more credibility to my impassioned defense of Leviathan? Why, yes, I am, because I enjoy Grand Belial's Key and I enjoy Leviathan often for the same reasons. The interesting variance in tempos, utilization of noisy, more dissonant sound effects in conjunction with very melodic stuff. They come from different philosophical perspectives, obviously. Like Grand Belial's Key is very mocking, very
Call me an anti-Semite. Stop it. I'm anti-termite.
Leviathan is more about, it's not really suicidal. I mean, they do have an album called The 10th Sub-Level of Suicide, but I noticed something triumphant in that his response to these suicidal thoughts is very angry. He uses that to fuel his art so he can create more. So aesthetically, on the surface, it's very negative, but maybe it's just because I listen to Leviathan at the gym a lot, but in a way it's rather uplifting. But that same sort of push through adversity, I think, is common to both Grand Belial's Key and to Leviathan, as well as their utilization of various Merciful Fate-esque compositional techniques. Where they substantially differ, however, is Grand Belial's Key is almost downright anti-Scandinavian in their recusal from the various Nordic black metal tropes, whereas Leviathan is heavily influenced by the Norwegian stuff and doesn't show any shame over that fact. So getting back to this sort of push-pull between more melodic stuff and more percussive stuff that I find to be so intriguing in Leviathan's sound, I think the best example of that would be in the second song off of the second album, Heir to the Noose of Ghoul. Speaking of studying at the altar of black metal, this part here is very almost like Vaughn-esque, and then it leads into more dissonant stuff, and then these interesting little ambient interludes between sections. And now we're straight up black thrash. But those little ambient bits are interesting. He actually has done fully ambient albums that are very heavy on the found sounds and weird clean guitar. But that's not what we're listening to now. Now we're listening to very aggressive black thrash in the destruction mold before the ambient stuff comes back, of course. I remember a very young Jub attempted to emulate those vocalizations in high school, but here's the real meat of the track. This nasty groove riff. Nice little double bass drums going along in syncopation with that groove riff. Very Tom G. Warrior-esque exultation to the imaginary audience to rock out a little harder before we get back into some tunneling and spooky sorts of riffs. This song has that interesting tripart type structure from sort of a crossover between super primal, primitive Vaughn-esque stuff leading into that semi-technical black thrash leading into Hellhammer on Quaalude's level of just nasty black metal groove riffs. I fucking love Heir to the Noose of Ghoul. I listen to this song quite a bit. I listened to the first 3 Leviathan albums quite a bit. Then there was some sort of legal problems with Moribund and also the arrest I talked about earlier. Leviathan was put on ice. Eventually it did come back in more of a death metal-y form, which I also enjoy, but for me, the stuff that holds a lot of emotional weight for me is Leviathan's strictly black metal material from the earlier part of the 2000s. So, if anybody gives you shit for listening to Leviathan, tell them to fuck off.
I bust mad flows like I bust nuts on of-age girls' butts.
I mean, say what you want about the tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos.